The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus entered a village where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary, who sat beside the Lord at his feet, listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me." The Lord said to her in reply, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
A word of caution to those with little ones. I have a quote that's going to come up real fast in this homily that has a little bit of language in it, so just so you're aware of that. In Alice Walker's now classic novel entitled The Color Purple, one of the characters, Shug, remarks, quote, "I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. People think pleasing God is all God cares about, but any fool living in the world can see it's always trying to please us back." End quote. What did you hear Jesus say to Martha? Is he taking her to task? Does he say Martha is doing wrong or that her behavior is bad? It's kind of funny, actually it's kind of tragic, that we are pretty much trained to see and to hear opposition, even when there isn't any, even when it's not there. No wonder we're so polarized. All Jesus is doing is expressing concern for Martha, not judgment. He's concerned about her anxiety, her stress. Essentially, he's saying, hey, you need to chill, you need to back off. You need to pull back from this self-imposed pressure you're putting on yourself and see a bigger picture. No one's pressuring Martha. That's all going on inside of her. And she's doing it to herself. In my column a couple weeks back, I wrote about my recent trip to Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula. I left something out. What I didn't write about was that the evening before I was going to head home, I noticed I had a low tire. And so I went and filled the tire with air, kind of hoping it was still going to hold in the morning. It didn't. I had already prepared myself for that. I spotted a repair shop, I already had the number ready. So I called first thing in the morning, And the mechanic explained to me just how busy he was, how behind he was, how many cars he had waiting. But he said, I understand you need to get home, so bring it in as early as you can and I'll take care of it. And when I arrived at his shop, I noticed he really was that busy. There were cars like in a big L-shaped all around. And I remember thinking to myself, even though it's only 9 o'clock in the morning, if I get out of here by noon, I will be lucky. But to my surprise, he took me in right away and told me there was a coffee shop within walking distance. And when I came back, he was just finishing up the car, and as I was paying him, I noticed some jars of local honey on the counter, so I asked him about this local honey, and he proceeded to tell me, yeah, that was my daughter's idea several years ago. She had the idea that we should do beekeeping on the side. And then he went on to explain how they started off with just one little hive and it grew to 2, and how often they got stung because they couldn't afford the protective equipment. Now they have that equipment and they've added more hives. And one year the queen took off and all the bees followed her and they lost everything. And how difficult it is to take care of the bees, especially in the winter, because the winter there is so harsh. And what you have to do to extract the comb from the hive and boil down that. He went on and on and on, and I thought to myself, well, I can kind of see why you're behind. And yet, as I left, as I got into the car with my jar of honey in hand, I was actually thankful that I had had a tire problem. Because in speaking with him and spending time with him, he really made the whole experience one of really joy and gratitude. I never felt like I was an imposition, but rather he made me feel like I was a welcomed guest who belonged at his shop. And it occurs to me as I hear today's gospel, so often, all too often, we do exactly what Martha does. Too often it's not our busyness, but it's our anxiety that prevents us from really staying in the moment. The concern in the gospel isn't busyness, but the anxiety that comes from within us that causes us to lose sight of the bigger picture, to lose focus on what really matters. An anxious, fearful, stressed out, and nervous mind fails to be attentive to another person, fails to be attentive even to one's own self, let alone the color purple or the presence of Christ.